First up, though, let's talk to Alex Wilson. He's a London Assembly member for Reform UK and joins us regularly. Good morning to you, Alex.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. So, look, we've gone through a lot of these Shabana Mahmood announcements, a Trump-style visa ban, 3 countries in particular, 20-year wait for a permanent right to stay in this country. Refugees could be sent home if their home country is safe. It reassessed every 2.5 years. Jewellery and other assets seized to pay for accommodation from small boat migrants if they've got them, but not if they're family heirlooms. So they'll just say anything they've got is a family heirloom. And also basically advising judges, can you stop letting people stay using Article 8 of the ECHR because you're not interpreting it right? Is that all going to work?
Well, as you said just before the break, Julia, if this was a reform announcement, then the chances are the Labour Party, Starmer, Streeting, Mahmood, all of them would be decrying it as being racist and not what they'd want to do. So, let's give some credit to Shabana Mahmood here. She's at least recognising there's a problem. And we've had 39,000 small boat crossings this year alone. We'd already reached the equivalent of the whole of last year by the end of October. Yep. There's a massive crisis going on. And to her credit, she's acknowledged that. But that, I think, is where the credit has to run out. Because unless you actually are prepared to do things like withdrawing from the ECHR, all of this is going to be clogged down in legal challenges, as it was under the Conservatives and as it continued to be under this government. There are 2 fundamental problems that she has. One is the Parliamentary Labour Party. We saw when the government was trying to not even cut the welfare bill, but just slightly slow down the growth of the welfare bill, Labour backbenchers up in arms, Starmer capitulated.
Wait a minute, do any of these measures require an act of Parliament, though?
Well, they're saying that legislation will be required for some, as I'm sure it will, but that's when it comes to the Parliament, and Labour MPs will vote against it because they don't believe in the principle behind it. But the other key problem that she's got is Lord Hermer as Attorney General. It's all very well the Home Secretary saying to judges they need to interpret the law differently, but ultimately the government's top solicitor will not buy that. If the government as a whole are serious about doing this, then Keir Starmer needs to sack Lord Hermer as Attorney General. If he doesn't do that, which I don't think there's any indication he will, then I think it's fairly clear that Shabana will be left on her own, and it'll be yet another set of announcement that isn't followed through when it comes to crunch.
Let's face it, that's what's most likely going to happen, given even what happened under the Tories, let alone under this Labour government. They tend to back down on these things. And again, at least as tough measures under the Tories would have sort of actually garnered the Tory base. But I'm not sure the Labour base is going to be even that up for this. But you mentioned things like advice to the judges and in terms of how they interpret things in Article 8. But again, even if a judge did actually listen to that advice, not quite sure why they would. They're unaccountable and unelected. Whoever it is who loses their appeal, they can just appeal to the European Court, the European Convention, and the European Court of Human Rights, and then they can have it overturned, because their interpretation is basically, if you've once met someone who once went to Britain, you've got a right to be here. So I mean, if you've got a plant pot here, you're allowed to stay here. So it's going to be challenged anyway, isn't it? Unless you leave the European Court of Human Rights, the European Convention on Human Rights.
Exactly. If you don't make that fundamental, bold step of leaving those international frameworks that we're part of, so the ECHR obviously being the main one, and the Human Rights Act that enshrines it in UK law, if you're not prepared to take that step, then this is just going to be, as everything the Tories tried, it's going to get bogged down in legal challenges. And we know where the Labour Party sits on that. They are weak, they are wet, they are woke, and they will always take the side of the lawyers rather than the side of the British taxpayer who's paying for all this.
How long do you think that is tenable? Because there's no doubt at all, that reform is leading the agenda on this issue and sort of pushing the other parties to vaguely more sensible positions. The Overton window has shifted, undoubtedly. And even though they're being drag-kicking and screaming, Labour and some parts of the Tory party, they are nevertheless being dragged. But, I mean, how much do you think any of this is likely to change? And how much do you think that actually Labour will be forced to deal with this issue? Because even with the economy in the state it's in, a week and a bit before a budget, immigration, and illegal immigration in particular, is still number one as a concern for people.
There was a very interesting poll that came out over the weekend from Ipsos, and as well as the standard voting intention question, they also asked respondents to judge how they, which party they thought was best to deal with a whole range of different issues. And Reform came out on top for immigration on 35%, Labour on just, I think it was either 5% or 7%. So
Ouch.
so far behind. And you're absolutely right. It's Reform that's leading the agenda, pushing that Overton window. The Conservatives are playing catch up as well. I know Chris Philp is now talking about withdrawing from the ECHR. Great, welcome to the party. Although again, I think there's probably a large element of Conservative parliamentary MPs who might not be so keen on that. A lot of those that were selected first during the Cameron era and the A-listers, they're be happier in the Lib Dems, a lot of them. But no, we're leading the agenda. If people are wanting to play catch up, that's great, because at least we're talking about the right kind of issues. But fundamentally, when it comes to the next election, or as you said in your just before the break, come the revolution, you need to put people in charge to deliver this who actually believe in what they're doing and actually committed to making this happen. I don't think that will happen with the Labour Party. I don't even think it will happen with the Conservatives.
And that's been one of the issues, isn't it? These things just get torpedoed by the blob, by the civil servants, by the lawyers, and unless you actually believe in it and really want it to happen, are unlikely to actually happen. What do you make of the latest set of protests that we've seen? Thousands protesting against plans to house 600 asylum seekers at Crowborough, a military camp. Again, in a camp, but they'll be open. They'll be free to walk around, and the camp is very close to the to schools and the like. What do you make of those protests? Yet more and more ordinary people going out, on their own free time and protesting arrival of, hundreds of military-aged men arriving in their small towns.
Well, I've actually got a friend and a former work colleague who lives in Crowborough, and he's very concerned about this happening on his doorstep, as I think most people would be. But you've seen it, whether it's hotels, whether it's HMOs, or whether it's these kind of camps that are now being mooted, wherever they're being placed, the local residents are concerned, because we saw what happened at Epping, that horrific sexual assault on a 14-year-old girl, and that's what people are concerned about. They want to be safe. So if people have to be held somewhere, and to be fair, they do until they're deported, it needs to be somewhere secure. We were able to build pop-up Nightingale hospitals. Why can't we do something similar with this, but make it a very, very short-term thing while we're processing, while we're rejecting the asylum claims, and then while they're waiting to leave the country, because we can't go on like this. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people being held in all this different range of accommodation, costing the taxpayer, what is it, about $8 billion a year? Or $8 million a day. So it's horrific. And ultimately, we've got to say no, and we've got to have a system that is robust enough to detain, deport. Then we solve the problem. Stop the incentives to come in the first place. At the moment, all you have from Starmer is smash the gangs. He's not smashing the gangs. He's just smashing the record year on year.
This is it. Does anyone actually think any of this is actually going to happen? That is the really big question, isn't it? I don't think anyone really does. Can I ask you just about another story that's something that Reform has flagged up? And I'm desperately trying to find that out. I've just found the notes. Special needs children are in the majority in some schools because of the colossal overdiagnosis of conditions such as ADHD and dyslexia, according to Richard Tyson, an article for The Telegraph. He's claimed that psychologists, taxis and even parents are making money from the system for diagnosing special needs conditions at the expense of the health of children. I have to say, my daughter was an academic private school. I was amazed to discover in some exams more children were given extra time than children who didn't get extra time for some sort of special need. And that was at an academically selective top school where most of the kids get A's and A stars. And they're still having parents who are, let's call it what it is. It's called cheating. It's what we used to call it in my day. It's called cheating, getting extra time for your kid. The reality is, every head teacher I've ever spoken to, every psychologist I've spoken to who's worth their salt says, this is being massively overdiagnosed. Parents are either in working class parents basically trying to get extra benefits, and middle class parents trying to game the system and get better exam results for their kids. How are you going to stop it?
Well, Richard Tice is about to be doing a press conference covering this in about 20 minutes' time, so look for the detail there. But certainly, as reported in his article this morning, he's identified the problem. Over the last decade, then we've been seeing the numbers of children being given these education, health and care plans rising by about 10% a year. Now, are our children really 10% more needy every year? I don't think so. So we've got to look at this problem of overdiagnosis, and it creates a whole load of cost as well. You have transport issues. I mean, one of the savings that I think Lancashire County Council, one of the councils that we're now running, has already identified and is delivering is a £3 million saving on transport by using minibuses rather than taxis to transport some of these children to their school. That's the kind of thing we've got to look at, because otherwise all these councils are going to be so overburdened by the costs of SEND, adult adult social care, and so on. And we're not going to have the money to fill in the potholes or pick up the bins or provide other school places for other kids. So it's a huge challenge. Richard's absolutely right to identify it. Let's watch the press conference in a few minutes' time and see what he comes up with as the answer.
Well, it's going to be going. We'll give some detail as we're on air. Alex Wilson, always good to talk to you, former UK's London Assembly member. Thank you for that. Sam Armstrong, I'd like you to come back in, actually, just on that issue of special education needs. If you do anything on education as a journalist, you will be inundated with desperate parents, the parents of kids who are really desperately in need of special needs, trying to get the help they need, trying to get their kid into a specialist school or whatever it is. And then you just know there are hundreds of thousands of kids now who get a diagnosis. I mean, I've met parents who go, oh, my kid's got dyspraxia. Your kid's slightly clumsy. My kid's dyslexia. It's like, I've watched her, she can read. She just, with dyscalculus as well, can't do maths. Like, your kid is an average kid, just not a brilliant kid. Why have you put a label on your kid? But parents do this.
Yeah, and we spoke about this about 6 months ago. I've never had the reaction that I've had when we spoke about it. But I will say what I said then, and I will say it as firmly as I did then, which is, it is not the case, it cannot be the case that 60 to 70% of kids have got some medical deficiency. Kids come in a broad spectrum of abilities, personalities, enthusiasm. And by the way, if you've got a boy in particular, that boy is very likely to be hyperactive from age 4 through to 14 or beyond. And only more so if you feed him on junk, if you let him have sugary drinks, play games on his phone or on Xbox until 3 in the morning. If you've got a boy, he has not got, chances are overwhelmingly, he's not got ADHD. He needs to be sent outside to play. Stop worrying about strangers all the time.
Competitive sports, broccoli and bedtime.
Sports. If he's kicking off in class every morning, make him run around the house 10 times before you send him off to school.
No, but this is basic stuff.
Honestly, there are parents that need a little bit more shame before they go and
therefore we can then focus resources on the parents and the children who really do need help, and really the parents are doing everything right and their children need help. And like with all these things, like the mental health crisis, we need to be helping those who genuinely need it and focusing resources on them, no waiting lists to get help and the like. But if everyone's got a problem, then no one gets help. That's the key thing. 10:47 is the time.